In honor of the 2024 National Week of Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Relatives, we will now hear from co-chair of the National Congress of American Indian Violence Against Women Task Force, Dr. Juana Mahel Dixon, to start us off in a good way.
I ask you to take a moment, and as they probably fix this up, that come in a good way. I ask that Creator come and be with us. Chalupa wheel, come Creator. That I ask that our people from the West come and gather and listen to these words that I share with you. I am also looking at from inside my heart and my mind and from the all life is sacred that we are good people. No shu no puli. When we look at that in terms of the women's, and as we gather them, as we put ourselves on a journey to acknowledge the MMIW, the work of so many folks, that we have to keep in mind that our work is only begun to unearth itself, to reveal itself of all those things we must do as a people, that we must make this travel throughout Indian country. So I ask Creator to come in a good way and be here and let me speak with you for a moment. Thank you. Jonas. You know, in solidarity with all our relatives, we have our work that we've been doing for quite a long time, and we didn't know that from the 90s to now that we would be standing up and speaking to something so powerful that we worked through generations of relatives who have gone and gave us the work to do and continue to do the work for the next generations. We look at the National Indigenous Women's Resource Center as a body, a source that we could go to break through all the ceilings that were there that we had to look at. There were glass ceilings that we had to look at to break them apart so that we could be seen through the eyes of our relatives who don't see us as tribal people. And that was one way to do that. We have our Congressional Sovereign Congress of the National Congress of American Indians, which carries this sovereign side of all of us tribes working together, members and non-members of NCAI who are sovereigns throughout Indian country and now Alaska as well. And when I think about so many of our relatives, even our Hawaiian relatives, who are actually the tribal people of their islands and their nation, that even though they had to agree under their queen to not claim sovereignty, but they had to do this to keep their lands. But that didn't protect them from everything that's going on. So when I work with NIWRC on the MMIW Family Advisory Work Group, we're united in this week that's coming ahead of us. And we are all the time united, and we have to join in the celebration of this clarion call, this call to arms in defense and protection of all our relatives and our sisters. When we say this about our women and our sisters on that side of us, doesn't exclude all our other family members. But what it doesn't do, it looks at the line that as the women are the givers of the children, the women carry the children and the men hold the children. And it's a beautiful relationship. But when we look at our Indigenous women, girls, and what's going on, the numbers and what's being has to be understood. It's so disproportionate in terms of the violence, the disappearance, whether it's trafficking, whether it's dealing with people coming and just stealing our people, you know, and whether it's the systems they go into and they don't get to come back, they go into some housing programs that they disappear in. And we look at the hate as well, with the clear intent to eradicate is when you have the cartels who say that there used to be for us in the lower 4 states, but California specifically, kill any Indian is what they do now. They used to make it a point to kill us, but now it's any Indian, especially our women's. And when we reflect about how do you affect change? How do you look at it from an impact of what the tribal words would be our way of life for this generation and the generations to come? It's systemic issues that they talk about on the federal level, on our government to government relationship. But if they don't pay attention to what we're saying, you can have UNDRIP, you can have documents, you can look at the laws that have been done and the history of this, they have not still affected change. There's no celebration if the budget increases by 1 million or 10 million, whatever that number is, it's not enough. They didn't go in with enough. There's a trust responsibility of this country to us as tribal people, as the sovereigns of this country, this nation of relatives, that is not being honored. We have taken the higher ground and not called them to task on trust and looking at the breach of trust. You have to look at this though. We're looking at our missing and murdered, how old and how large and how powerful we are as American and Alaska Natives. We are not Native Americans. We are of our tribal names, and we have collectively agreed under the Constitution as tribes to look at the American Indian and Alaska Native side. We brought our Alaskan relatives in there so that they would be protected. And as they did this work for us, they were kind of signaling them out to leave them out. We wouldn't accept that. And as organizations that we are as NCI, the urgency to address this is unmeasurable. If my generation of young women in my 20s were fighting this, I'm now in my 70s, come on, something is not being done from one administration to the next to the next. I will tell you this, working with currently President Joe Biden and the journey of his 30 years in this, we've been there. We were there when he was a senator. We've been working on this since then. When he was vice president, he engaged in conversations with us. As president, it's not so easy, but he has people who are listening. When I look at the action week that we have to go for and how we have to raise awareness and demand justice, we should not have to be demanding justice, but we have to, and we cannot stop. That is a continuing, relentless journey that we're on. I can tell you how epidemic this is, that we are raising our children how to protect themselves from this kind of thing. Social media is another example. There were clearly the president had put the clock on TikTok, right? Well, the thing is, all the social media of our children aren't educated. We didn't have these phones. Our tribal customs traditions tell you we will reach a state of placelessness. We are there. That doesn't mean we weren't displaced before, but even more so now in what can be done. I remember when our relatives would talk about how hard it was to get away from the people who were arriving into these lands, and that they had to practice a form of infanticide where they could only carry the number of children in their arms to run away from the perpetrators. And the fact that our elders would go off to the side, into the trees, the hills, the sands, the rivers, the lakes, foothills, everything, to the oceans, they would move away from the tribal people who are trying to get away from this harm. And they'd find them, and sometimes they would kill our elders because they knew they would slow us down. Our people sacrificed so much so that our children upon children to now would be here. When you consider the advocacy of the government officials of NCI, the work they do, they are sovereign leaders representing a region of sovereigns. And NCI never saw itself as about its membership, but protecting the sovereignty of the tribes. When you think about that, and the media outlets that are there, the advocacy that NCI has been able to do under its former and current leadership, it's an education that is done in such a way that it affects change whether you're a member or not a member of NCAI. We know to come together. NCI is designed in such a way to move on a heartbeat to affect that change, to go to the Hill. That's why we put our building on Embassy Row, so we'd be on equal footing of all the sovereigns of the world. When you look also at the fact that required us to become an organization, did not take away the bottom line that we are a sovereign Congress and we deal in that manner, which is why NCI and the movement we have on the MMIW and the advocacy we do with our national org, that NIWRC, the fight is constantly ongoing. Is determination to create a better world for our sisters and all our relatives, These aren't said simply because it's information you need to have. This is a way of life for us. I was born into this. The generations before me were born into this hostility, this murdering, this missing, this trafficking, all those things we talk about. When we also look at the fact that we know that when we do the wiping of tears in one nation, the giving of breath to the spirits of another, all the different ways we describe that, and the relationship of all our relatives, which are the creatures of the earth and of the air and of the water, and knowing about the fact that we're looking at the belly of the fire of the earth and how it moves, how the earth moves, how the four directions guide us, and our principal doors of the western, the eastern, southern, and northern doors are all a part of our world. This is where our spirits travel. As we do, we're not talking about something that just happened yesterday. This has generations. If if you think about the U.S. and how magnificent it is in its own way, and the fact that the rest of the world feels challenged by its democracy, but when you look at the Constitution, it starts "We the people." We the people is all of us. We are tribes. We are named in there. We are not named as Native Americans. Congress gets convenient and kind of builds in a word, and it does more harm because anybody born under that circumstance in America is Native. So now we have this, we don't need this because it doesn't take care of the fight we have to fight and the due diligence we have to do and the people we have to call on the 11 northern states and the 4 southern states are impacted by 2 separate countries who have no problem violating the US laws and crossing over and taking us. We also look at every bit that is being done to bring this matter to the attention to people. A whisper, a breath travels. It travels, and it's heard. And so we're saying to you openly giving breath to the words that the MMIW crisis is important, that we need the help of every tribal community, all the communities that are out there and at large to address it. Only because if we don't do it together, what's protecting your daughter, your women peoples? What's protecting you from what's happening here? It's not that we don't exclude our men and our young boys. They're impacted as well, but this is MMIW week. That's why we're speaking in this manner. I had never forget all my relatives. It's honoring the lives of our sisters and taking meaningful action to ensure justice for them. We're sit for 3 years in making the Not Invisible Act work and the commission work. And what we did, we had to listen to the testimonies. They were gut wrenching, so strong that you felt it was palatable to feel, but you also were able to realize by giving breath to the words, the spirits that were harmed are felt, the bodies that were hurt and harmed and killed and buried, all those things that you could possibly ever think of was done. One part here, one part there, all over the place. The thing is, when they're there as the family giving breath to the relative that's gone missing and or murdered, you feel them. That's who we are as tribal people. That's what we do. Our relationship with everyone is all of that. The spirit of the earth, as well as the spirit of your relatives have been harmed and taken. And honoring the lives of our sister and doing a meaningful action to ensure justice for them is continuing. We have a few decades in doing this, even though we have the Not Invisible Act doing what it's doing. When it goes to the federal system to modify and input and stuff like that, the relatives who sat there with us had to go back to their jobs, had to go back to their world, had to go back to what they do. But it governed what they could say or not say regarding the commission on the Not Invisible Act. That happens, but that doesn't change what we need to do. So we have to look at what they might have put in changes. We may not agree with them. As a matter of fact, there are some we do not. I will tell you for sure, I do not. And as a sovereign, I want an answer, but I will do that in speaking with you. When we look at the time of action is now, we have to resolve and unite in our purpose, but striving to do that carries with it the entire infrastructure of a human being and knowing that all life is sacred, that our people are felt, our stamina, our heartache, our tears, our willingness to give breath to these words gives it not only to the people, but our relatives who are gone will hear this. When we say seeing my sisters home, I can't be where they were all taken. I can't get there to where they were all harmed. And when I say to the relatives, seeing our sisters home, I, with my heart as a traditional woman, as a tribal leader, and my entire being and spirit, I'm asking them to carry that for us, as I will for yours. That's what NCI's extraordinary gift to one another is, the we of us. There's no one individual tribe when we do this together. There are things individual tribes have to do, but it's not that we don't pay attention. We do. We want to make sure that if they need us, we're there. That's the same thing with this. The women came together on the MMIW, and when they did, the use of relationship with the federal government to reaffirm the indigenous protective systems, restoring full authority. That's why UNDRIP was written. It took us quite a few years to get the S on UNDRIP, but it was for all the relatives. It has a measure in which it does take care of us, but it's a UN document. It is not enough because the US has supported it, and it took a couple presidencies to get it supported. And when they did, it began to have full impact, especially our relatives in Alaska, and restoring the full authority of our American and Alaskan nations to protect the indigenous people. And we say indigenous, we are up here. My village, where I am right now, is only 6,000 years old, although we've been here longer. But this is like one of our newer villages. Now, who could say that in the US except us tribal people? And when you think about the generations of the impact of all the other nations of the world who came here to claim their discovery of our world, they impacted us by stealing us, by enslaving us, taking us to other countries. The missing and murder continues to go, and looking at our responses to our Alaskan relatives and protect them includes our native Hawaiian tribal peoples. I know them as governors and resilient and beautiful spirit keepers of their world, but they too have to mutate themselves to an organization to protect their people because of the relationship that Hawaii has to make Hawaii, and it took away so much of their power. And if they don't feel it's taken away, they mutated the power. Now we had a relationship with Senator Inouye and Akaka that we will do everything we can to protect Hawaii and its people, so that, and in turn, they had eyes on for us. What is that now? What does that look like? When you're ensuring a response to indigenous people and advocacies and services, we have to have the adequate resources. If we own the majority of this country in exchange for giving the majority of this country to the US to thrive and grow as it is, we don't need 1% of the money, 10% of the money. We need to be given a just, measurable response and providing the services. And then when we look at all our relatives who are, you can go through all the bureaus in the interior and all the departments inside of justice, all the departments in Indian health, you can go down the line for environment, the whole 9 yards. The thing, I like that 9 yard thing, but the whole thing is that you have to look at it all when it comes to us. Implementing the federal response to MIW is going to take both, not only the land and the indigenous women that are sacred, we have to connect all of that with our legislative body, our policy action folks who protect that. We have relatives, we don't walk on water. We're human beings, and there have those who continue to make mistakes and perpetrate that are tribal people. We're not ignorant of that. You don't throw it back in our face that, well, you're only thinking about those who've been harmed. What about those who are harming? We do not ignore what's going on, but we have a very small measured footprint of how to do that with the resources you make available to us. And the thing is, we gave so much to this country. Our warrior societies, men and women alike, joined you in every fight you had and every world fight you had. We were there. Recognizing the land and the indigenous women are sacred, it connects us in such a way that we have the balance. We have not only the balance of who we are as a peoples of sovereigns across this country, but also amongst ourselves. It's never been more honorable and more beautiful and more heartfelt to have our male and female side join together in our task force meetings and our gatherings and our conversations. Yes, we can get caught up in some legislative stuff, but that's Congress. Every member of Congress from my tribe alone and me is my representative. I don't have just what's in California, I have the entire Congress. Every single tribe does. And when you understand that and finding, carving that path, the balance of that and making us find that way, that's why MMIW and this celebration is so powerful and so important, that it's going to give us acknowledgement of the safety of the balance and how we thrive together. And everyone is there with the mother, our earth, and our women. The ceremonies, the sacred side of this, cedar woman, when you think about corn woman, when you think of, the women of the sea, the goddess side of the women of the sea is a co-creator. You don't know this, but we do, and it may not be that tribe's understanding, but we have grown to such, by custom and tradition, we have, with the graciousness of peoples, acknowledge another tribal's way and how they do that. When I think about all those who gave of themselves, and the fact that when our people were first here in the beginnings, they had no clothing, and they talk about how the tree people knew to shed the bark and shed the leaves of their trees so that they would be warm during the winter. That is symbiotic relationship doesn't go away. So when you think about our missing and murdered, we feel the pressure of the earth, the pressure of the air. It's almost like, when you take a breath and you breathe it in, you say your prayer so that that sister can be sung home, so that sister's spirit can be at peace. And that commission did that. Now, when you look at what our women do today in trying to missing and murdered women this week, the celebration of acknowledgement and knowledge and thriving to continue against all this, they do it with a clean heart. They do it with a strong heart. They ask that at our events and social media, Advocacy send out that message of a clear, strong hearted call to all the governments, every aspect, every part of it, so they would, the world that we won't accept any more Indigenous women going missing and are murdered. There has to be a point in which you say, Creator, it's in your hands. And there is co-creators, the male and female side, it's in their hands to affect that change, to affect that conscious rhythm of thought, that heartfelt rhythm of thought, that physical aspect of taking that breath in and knowing that that breath was given to you from the creation of the world. The fact that when you are embraced by the warmth, you can do this. You do it without even thinking. When you go and it's a warm day, you can see the waves of the sun moving in across, how it waves when the heat wave. And you find you want to be cooler, so you go under the tree, so you sit in the shade of that tree, and you place your hand on the earth and it's cooler. You find you have maybe a bottle of water or a water container. You take a drink of that water and you breathe that in. All four elements have just surrounded you: the air, the fire, the water, and the earth. You do it without thinking as human beings, as the two-leggeds across this world. While our relatives who have been taken out in a murderous way under the missing and murdered are now feeling that when we pray, even if we don't know who they are, or even if we don't have all the numbers. But it's not a numbers game. It's about affecting change because you know better, we know better, we're doing this together, and we're asking that you affect this change now, not later, now, so that no more of our Indigenous women go missing or are murdered. I leave you with these words because I like to visit and tell story, and this is not the time. And maybe when we see each other again, we can do that. And I also want to always stay open because every time we gather, a relative comes to me and I get handed a piece of paper that tells me all the people in their world are still missing and murdered. And I take them home and pray and ask that Creator, I give breath to these words. They no longer belong to me. They belong to the people. take them where they need to go. Chonamish, all my relations. And you know, as relations, we don't get to pick and choose. We're the two-legged, the five-fingered people. We are all one. Chonamish.